Thank you. I appreciate that kind welcome. Today, I'd like to just go on a journey with you. If you let me be the conductor, can we go for a ride together? Are you all willing to do that?
Absolutely.
That means I need your interaction, I need your ideas, I need your feelings. Because when we talk about communication and anything about intercultural, it really is a matter, deeply a matter, of what you bring to the table. And you all do. You all bring a lot to the table. I'd like to have kind of a round table fellowship where I can maybe initiate some things, but let's see what we can come up with together. Is that agreed upon? Can we be a team today?
Yes.
Good. Well, let me ask you this question. Read that and tell me what you think.
Yeah.
90 seconds seems long.
Yeah, I thought it was 9 seconds.
Yeah, I thought it was 5.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you, why is it? Why is it that, should I stand in front of here for you?
I'm not very now.
Okay. Oh, good. Thank you. Matt has just turned me on. Don't go away, man. Consider, race is a social construct. It's not a genetic fact. It's not even a biological fact. It's a social construct. What does that mean when I say that? It's a social construct. Anybody want to take a shot? Yeah.
Something like is what we make it mean. There's a real physical thing, but it's what we make it mean.
That's right, exactly. It's almost as if genetically and biologically there is no such thing. There's just the human race. Several years ago, I had a liver transplant, and a living donor gave me 2/3 of his liver. And I am forever indebted to this person. I am a urban, as in Oakland, California, Oakland Raiders. Can I hear it for the Raiders? Can I hear it for the Raiders? I'm in Seahawk country. Okay. I am an urban, so-called African American. And the person that matched me with disease history, DNA, genetic, this and that, every type of possibility of matching me was not any of my brothers, but it was a southern Idaho farm boy who you would call Caucasian, and I would just call country. And anyway, this country guy and this urban guy actually had, the Mayo Clinic told us we had a greater match, as if we had such a great match as if we were identical twins. And his liver put into my open cavity once they took mine out has not had even one slight rejection in 11 years. So you can see the issue of race is really a makeup thing. And it's a way of putting people into a caste system, and it's a way of creating hierarchy. But biologically, genetically, it does not exist. But it dominates our interaction, doesn't it? It really does. Now, in light of that, where would you put the United States of America? Are we a monocultural society? Have we advanced to non-discriminatory? Or have we arrived at multicultural? What do you think?
I think it's a little bit of everything.
It kind of all depends on the day, the weather, and so on, doesn't it? Okay, I agree with that. Or whether Matt's around to turn you on. Well, listen, let me say this. What's so great about this country of ours is that we're carrying out a great experiment that no other nation dare try. And that's to have everyone come here as immigrants. Of course, the indigenous people are the founders and the first ones. All immigrants coming, and yet we're going to treat each other as if we're all first-class citizens. How good are we doing that? What kind of grade would you give the United States of America? What is our national motto? It's found on our penny, our nickel, our dime, our 50-cent piece, our quarter, our dollar bill. It's found on the presidential seal. What's our national motto? Did someone say in cash we trust? Not God anymore, but cash. But anyway, listen. It is e pluribus unum. Now, what does e pluribus unum literally mean, that Latin phrase?
Out of many, one.
Out of many, one. How are we doing as out of many backgrounds, one nation? Out of many races, one people. Out of many faiths, one society. Out of many cultures, one country. How are we doing? Seems like it all depends, maybe, huh? But overall, what would you give the entire United States? Well, you know, most of us need to journey, and I'm included, from monocultural mindset to intercultural mindset. But there's landmarks along the way that tell us where we're at. And today, at the end especially, I'm going to show you some current events, some excerpts or snapshots of current events. I'd like to see, where do you think your reaction is to these things? Because when we talk about intercultural development, the continuum, what we're really saying is, what's our reaction to cultural differences? Such as my brother Kyle here. Apparently, the difference is so physical. And yet, even at that superficial level, what's our initial reaction? What landmark would we land at? It's very interesting to consider that. So in other words, what's our experience of difference? Are we at the stage of denial? It all depends in a certain setting. Do we move on to defense? Maybe perhaps we get into minimization, and I'd like to talk a lot about that because I think most of us are stuck there and don't even know it. And then acceptance, we all like to hope we're there. Adaptation, we're somewhat learning, and I think we're willing to learn the more things are pointed out. And I hope one day we all get to integration. This idea of cultural competency is not something of a, how would you say, final award that you're going to get. It's an ongoing kind of, I would say, destination. And we're on a journey. And I don't think any of us, I'm not an expert, I don't have a monopoly on it. I want to learn just as much as you do. But let's see. When you look at this developmental model of intercultural sensitivity, developed by Dr. Bennett in about 1986 or so, about 30 years ago, he created these 6 stations. And what he did was try to delineate where we are when we run up across cultural differences. And the first 3 are considered ethnocentric. We hope to advance into ethno-relative. Ethnocentric means I take my cultural experience as the hub, and then I spoke out to other people with their cultural differences as the circumference of the rim. But everything is in measurement according to my point of reference, because I'm normal and you're not. I'm average, I'm common, and you need to get with it. But we don't say that. But we don't dare say that, because we've learned as we grow up to be very political, very, how would you say, surfacey, as our brother Kyle was mentioning. But eventually, we hope to gravitate to this point of ethno-relativism, which means my experience of my culture is in the context of other cultures, is in the stew or the soup of other cultures, and isn't something that sticks out as the so-called normal way. Now look at this. I'll put some words around these stages. Under denial, first experience is not to experience the difference. Avoid it. And then defense is to say it's us against them. That's how they do it. There they go again. Those stereotypes and so on. And then look at this one. Minimization or minimalization is the false sense. And I'd like to linger here in the next few slides on this one, because it's key. To cross over from ethnocentric to ethno-relative is based on, can we leave this third phrase here, this minimization or minimalization? False sense of cultural sensitivity. And look at this. It assumes we all are the same. Look at it at this level here. What we have in common is much more important. Doesn't that sound right? And isn't it true? But, in a sense, if you look at it here, everyone is equal. You see under minimalization? leveling of differences, elements of our own culture experienced as universal. It's almost as if the leveling of differences sounds good. And really, in a sense, I think we all believe in a kind of, let's see if I can get to here real quick, a kind of, look at number 3 here. All human beings are similar despite superficial differences. And this is where I really like to linger. Under minimalization, other cultures are trivialized. One tends to deny differences and only seek similarities. In a sense, colorblind. Do you know that if you're trying to pursue this colorblind approach, in a sense, you're keeping yourself with yourself as the center? How? What does that mean? I think we all believe in colorblind justice. Don't we believe in colorblind justice? But what about colorblind identity? Do we believe in that? Are we hoping for that? And in a sense, if we are, we're actually saying your differences, which really make up you, I'm going to wash over and just say we're all human. In a sense, it sounds good, but in another sense, it keeps us locked in to our own point of reference as the centerpiece. Are you kind of picking that up a bit? Does that make sense? It'll make a little more sense as we keep going. In other words, as long as we're under minimalization, we are under a difference avoidance. See, in our minds, difference equals liability. When will we get out of that? I don't know what's gotten into our blood, into our bone marrow, but differences are not a liability. What are they? What would you say instead? What do you think it takes to cross over? Differences are asset, and they're what? Yeah, it makes everybody who they are, what they are. Yeah. What else? Differences are what? Important. What else? Exciting. How boring if we don't have differences? Actually, differences are beautiful. They're just beautiful. The more differences, the better. But see, we have grown up in a society that has seen differences as a liability. Differences is something we need to level down. Because differences, in the end, in this country, typically has meant you have more access or less access to resources for a positive life. Differences have dictated access to opportunity. But if we step away from the system, if we step away from what we know as history and just treat each other as humans and see each other as brothers and sisters as we really are, then those differences become something of a strength. They become something of a, I would say, a true asset, and it allows us to get into this level where we become people that are difference-seeking rather than difference avoidance. I wonder, do we even have that kind of thought in our head? To be difference-seeking is actually to acknowledge the humanity in individuals, and is to validate their God-created individuality that makes the mosaic of humanity so beautiful. Or are we so geared into thinking that it's better to level down the difference? But I'm saying step away from that system of differences means advantages or disadvantages. Differences means privilege or lack of privilege. If we step away from the system that has so conditioned us, we'll see our humanity is latent within our own abilities to recognize each other as different. Actually, the more different, the better. Do you agree? What do you think? Our brother Kyle, would you say everything about him very, very different? Right, in a sense? But yet, that difference doesn't mean he's less than us. Doesn't mean we wished he could be something like us. It actually points to, look at how beautiful we are. If his beauty can shine like that. I could never stand on my hands like he did. I barely got out of bed in a quick fashion nowadays. I have to get out of bed and check my limbs And I have to bend my knees to see if they still work. Stretch my arms like this. And I have a kitty that's looking up at me like, hey, would you get this over with and get me some food? But anyway, it's an amazing thing. My body, and I am a little older than him, but it's an amazing thing to see the wonders of what he could do. Weren't you inspired by that? And in a sense, don't you see by seeing difference in him, it brings out the beauty, not only of him, but also of your own person. Now, when we look at people, typically, we see culture as the 10% of what a person really is. 90% of what a person's culture is submerged. You can't see it. And so look at these three levels here. You have most easily seen, surface culture. Then you have shallow culture, unspoken rules within the group. And then you have deep culture, unconscious rules. And I want to walk you through some of these icebergs. Look at this here. Just take a peek at that. Easy to see. But look at what's difficult to see. You know, and in the middle, down below there, it says approaches to health and medicine, attitude towards school. A lot of times, students who are different are put into special ed classes because of their attitude. They're put into special ed classes because they don't fit a certain mold. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I've seen this quite often. And a lot of it has to do with the assumption that everyone should think the way we think, and they should have attitudes like we all have. And in a sense, approaches to health and medicine. Most of my ancestors, up to my father at this point, who's 93, their experience of dealing with the system, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's employment, whether it's health, of always getting the short end of the stick, makes him question, should he really go see that doctor? Even in 93. Because as history has told us, even though he was the one that should have got the promotion 45 years ago, he didn't get it. And even though he was the one that should have gotten that house, he didn't have access to that house. So in his understanding, his whole history, which is below eyesight, he can't really trust a doctor like maybe some of us can and do. Because what his life experiences tell him is not the same thing that your life experiences tell him. Look at this here. Here's another set of items that are below the surface. Look at this, about 10 lines down. Concept of justice. Boy, I bet if we talked about what should certain people experience when it comes to justice, we'd come up with all types of ideas. We'd come up with all types of ideas about how the media has portrayed the level of justice regarding law enforcement and race issues recently. We could have quite a Jerry Springer interaction, couldn't we? I think we could. But all that's below the surface. And I think to the right here, the bottom, perspectives, and up to the left, life experiences. These are the main blocks that are not visible. And we jump to conclusions about what we see at the top, yet below are all these things. And the question is, how can you ever acknowledge a person? How can you ever validate a person? How can you ever enter into the riches of their differences until you let them tell your story, tell them their story? What is their story? What is their life experiences? What is their perspective? We so quickly judge people on the surface, and all we can see is 1/10 of who they really are. No wonder we don't have e-pluralism. And now with social media and smartphones and Instagrams and all these foreign things, I don't know what they are. I don't even get into Facebook, I'm afraid of it. I don't know what kind of things I would draw if I had opened up a Facebook. Don't you get a lot of people contacting you?
Yeah.
From way back when? See, I don't want that. That's scary. Anyway, social media has made it even more of a divorced situation among human beings, where differences aren't explored in the individual story. And in a sense, we become more and more avoiding what really diversity is. Diversity means all the ways we differ. It includes the readily visible differences, and the underlying differences. 90% is underlying. And just look at those there. I like that middle one, thought processes. Really, really. If you delve into why a person is aspiring, I grew up around a lot of people whose thought processes told them this. Go to school, not to get educated, not to be a lawyer, not to be a professor, not to be a chemist, but go to school for what? To what? to get out of your environment. What did you say again? I'm sure everyone wants to repeat it. Listen, I grew up in Oakland, California in the 60s, and our whole thought was, you go to school for one reason, to qualify to get into a college so you can play either basketball or football and then get into the NFL or the NBA. That's all we knew. That's all we saw. That was our thought processes. And that's all we considered to be the American way of life. And a large generation of folks that I grew up with, because they did not make that situation of a professional athlete, I hate to tell you where they are now. But that was the thought processes. And you have to see that's something that submerged well below the setting. Now look at this here. Systemic thinking. We see in the newspaper and the media, which shapes a lot of our understanding, and we react to events that just happen. Whether it's, I'll show you some things in the slide here. And we just see things and we make quick judgments, but if we go below, how about we get to the level of anticipate? Listen to this. It's to ask this, what's been happening? Have we been here or somewhere similar before? And then design. What are the forces at play that contribute to this thing at the top that just happened? Or do we just see what happens and say, okay, that's it? For instance, riots. Are riots good or bad? Oh, they're obviously bad. They're, except for Thomas Jefferson, he can get away with saying that. But he said, hey, a little bloodshed helps things every now and then. But we all know, and in general, we don't think riots are that positive, right? But the question is not, is it right or wrong? The question is why? What drove those people to that extent? What despair? What sense of discouragement? What sense of disillusionment? What history, ancestrally speaking, drove them to that decision to that degree? If we even go there, we're beginning to get into what I call the intercultural communication sensitivity portion. Because in the end, look at the transform level. How does our thinking allow this situation to persist? Oftentimes we see things far away and we think that's their problem in St. Louis and Ferguson and Baltimore, wherever. Actually, or in the Middle East or wherever it may be. But actually, we have a microcosm of that in our own setting and moment. It all depends how it's manifested. Now, what does this mean? It's what you don't know that makes you vulnerable. What does that mean? Vulnerable to what? What would you think? Could you raise your hand and I'll what do you think? What's the answer? Makes you vulnerable to what?
The unknown.
The unknown. What else? To what? To intimidation. Fear of outcome. Yeah, failure. Yeah, what else?
To ignorant thinking.
Yes, ignorant thinking. Very good. That's a good way of putting it. What else?
Crashing on the iceberg.
Yeah, crashing on the iceberg. Makes you vulnerable to not interculturally communicate, to not be sensitive to the individual, to not be able to bridge with a person who's different from you. And in a sense, this country, so rich and so abundant, and under a blessed constitution, we're able to silo ourselves off and live a happy life. But in a sense, it's still superficial, it's still shallow, and it really doesn't touch the depths of humanity. And we're losing our humanity as a result. Now, this is a scene from Ferguson. 3 words, Black Lives Matter. Let's see what does that mean? What does Black Lives Matter mean to you? You've seen that phrase. They rioted and held the signs up on that. What are they saying there, Black Lives Matter?
They're important as everyone else.
And